Hamstring flexibility in a yoga class is so overly glorified to the point that there's been a term coined yoga butt, which refers to the very common occurrence of an injury in this area of the body. Now, the fact that we have a term for this and we talk about this openly just conveys how important it is to modify poses so that we don't have this happening to the degree that it has been. Now, I'm going to show you 5 modifications that you can make to particular poses that are going to support your students, first of all, in their awareness of this tendency. Now, they might think, I don't have loose, relaxed, flexible hamstrings, I'm fine. But that is not the people who are getting the injury all the time. It is all kinds of people, again, because hamstring flexibility is so glorified, because it is utilized to do so many different poses. But in reality, the hamstring flexibility that is required to do a lot of these poses is actually very unstable. A lot about hypermobility and not very much at all about functional purpose in the body, unless of course your functional purpose is to just get better and better and better at yoga poses and then maybe hurt yourself. If that's your plan, go for gold. If not, keep watching and I can show you the modifications that you can use in your classes. So the first obvious one is a standing forward fold, and it's very, very simple. Just stop pulling. Stop instructing your students to grab their big toes or grab their ankles or do anything that is actually going to add any degree of pull and tug onto the backs of the legs in addition to what gravity is already doing. So what might you do? You might say, oh, well, I'll just tell my students to hang there. When we hang there, it's just not very active. It's very passive. So we want to somehow create activation in the body via the front body chain lighting up, because this is what supports the willing lengthening of the tissues through the back of the body. Your body works in this way. It has natural reflexes for flexibility. And in doing that, you will support your students in building and progressing their flexibility in a much more functional, natural, organic way, as opposed to forcing, pulling, shoving, and trying to push the timeline of their body and really compromising their body's biomechanics. So what I like to do in a standing forward fold, and this can be done with the feet any distance apart. And I'll just note that if the feet are wide and it is a wide-legged forward fold, then you're probably going to have more capacity to reach the body or the arms through the legs, as opposed to what I'm going to show you now, which is where the arms will go along the sides of the legs. So whatever kind of distance between the feet works. And then from there, you're getting your students to activate the front chain of the body. I always liken this to doing a sit-up, but since people are upside down, it's like a sit-down. I don't know, I haven't figured out a good term for it yet, but they're essentially closing the gap as much as they can using their internal strength, not externally forcing the body or externally forcing the body with something like that, but using their internal mechanisms to do so. So I would cue it something like this. I would get them to really bend their knees to the point that they're able to bring a little bit more of a connection. Maybe it's not a full touch, and that doesn't matter, but allowing the knees to bend so that they can feel the freedom as the body starts to come down and forward. And then from there, this is the sit-up component. So they're drawing the torso towards the legs and simultaneously reaching the arms back this way. So you can go straight back, you could go straight down. I like a little bit of a diagonal in between because the back energy helps the torso to come this way. The down energy helps the torso to lengthen that way. So we go a little bit of both. And then from here, I'm literally doing a sit-up. I'm literally using my abdominal strength to bring my torso towards my thighs. And then from there, that's where I'm potentially playing with maybe getting my legs into a slightly straighter position. Again, if you have the legs wide, then that's going to look a little bit different in terms of bringing the body through. But the key points are we start with a good generous bend in the knees, which allows the torso to come closer towards the thighs or closer to that area of the body. Then we reach. Really, your students should feel a strong sensation of activation through the core and through the thighs sometimes, which is what is supporting them. We're not passively allowing the body to be forced into the stretch, and this is going to really help to build up the structural stability in the joints so that your students can minimize the chance of a hamstring injury. The second modification I want to show you is for a stretch like this. You might have variations with what's happening with this leg, how apart the legs are. None of those things really matter too much right now. What matters is the direction that we're usually cueing our students to go in, which is to come forward towards this leg, whether that's really, extending the chest forward or whether that's rounding a little bit more, just depending on what the aim is. So in any case, a lot of those movements are fueled by the hands grabbing the foot. So the first thing that you would do is just not have the hands grab onto the foot at all. And instead, just like we did in the standing forward fold, we're just reaching and reaching and reaching. Now, my personal preference to teach is to not actually engage in that much at all, but rather to lift the leg. So the reason why I like this is because the activation of this muscle here speaks to the tissues on the opposing side, and it willingly lengthens them. So you can use this as an alternative. You can use this as a way to prepare the body if you are teaching a more forceful variation, which would involve, even this is forceful because the floor is holding my leg in place. Here, nothing's holding my leg in place. Nothing's holding my body in place. I have to be the one to create it. And again, it becomes more about the activation of the front body chain all through here to create the closeness, which naturally creates the release through the back of the body. The third modification I want to show you is a three-legged dog. This is really important because when a lot of students get up into a three-legged dog, here's what you will see them do. This kind of thing. And this is just really pulling and tugging on the hamstring of this bottom leg. So what you can get them to do is to first draw the pubic bone towards the belly button, making sure that the knees are bent, which enables them to do so. And then from there, without losing the pubic bone to belly button activation, then they're sweeping the back leg up. All of a sudden, there is just so much more activation going on. And then from there, they might explore putting a little bit of less of a bend in the standing leg, pressing the hands and shifting away, maybe even playing around with tipping the pelvis a little bit. But even then, there's still a lot of tugging on this bottom leg hamstring. So pulling pubic bone to belly button as the leg lifts will really give a lot of great protection to the hamstring on that standing leg. Not only that, but it will naturally activate the muscles through the leg that lifts, through the back of the leg at the upper thigh and the glute as the leg lifts up instead of tipping the pelvis to do the work. And that creates a reciprocal release of the tissues through the opposing side of that lifting leg. The fourth modification I want to show you is the very infamous halfway lift. If you are getting your students to lift and extend their chest forward as their hands are on the ground, well, this is going to massively tug on the hamstrings. Very similar to the way that I showed you in a three-legged dog, where to get the leg high, the pelvis does this and that tugs on there. We lose a lot of stability through that area of the body. So instead of having the hands down on the ground, I always think of this, or I kind of phrase it as what I say is a handstand style halfway lift. So I get students to place their hands somewhere onto the legs and press so that they feel the activation through this area of the body. So if I were to kind of pull their hands away from them, they would fall forward. That's how much you want them to press. Then from there, they're going to lean the weight into the toes. And notice how I'm not doing this, right? We've got pubic bone draws to belly button, hands pressing onto thighs. And if you feel into one armpit, you'll feel this little like hard point right here. That's what we want, okay? We don't want that to be soft. So we lean forward, pull pubic bone towards the belly button, press into the hands, and the hands can be anywhere on the legs as long as we're not overextending those hamstrings, and then leaning forward and pressing here into the hands as the pubic bone stays pulling to the belly button. And you'll notice that my knees are a little bit bent. And the purpose of that is to, again, just drop this down a little bit, because as soon as we straighten, then the tendency is to do this. So if we put a little bend into the knees, it actually helps to activate the hamstrings somewhat as well. Reposition the pelvis so the pubic bone can pull to the belly button, and then lean a little bit of weight forward into the toes and press the hands onto the legs. And the fifth modification that I want to show you, I'm going to show you through the lens of triangle pose, but it really can be applied to so many other poses as well. So what we often get our students to do is to come down to either touch the floor or touch a prop such as the block. But when we look at the angle in this pose and that stretch that's being created here, well, it's pretty much this. It's a lot of overextension in that area of the body with not a great deal of support. Also because the torso is coming, the hips are positioned in such a way, and then we're getting our students to explore their depth and explore their range, or sometimes we're thinking that if they lower enough to be able to touch a block, then, you know, it's accessible. That's the modification for them. But the amount of flexibility that's required in that hamstring in order for them to get that low, it's generally transitioning into the realm of hypermobility, and it's just really not worth it. So pull back on the depth so that they are able to maintain the structural capacity. And one other example quickly before we wrap up of that would be something like a warrior 3. Don't get your students to touch down onto the block. It's way too low for them. If they can't support themselves in that position, then they need to pull back on their depth, and that also is a way that they can be a little bit more mindful of what's happening in that hamstring. I hope that these modifications were valuable for you in your teaching. If you have any questions, please let me know. I would love it if you could like this video if you found it really useful, and make sure that you subscribe to my channel for more teaching tips just like this.